For 87 years, humanity had a designated spot in the Galactic Council, the basement. Imagine an auditorium built for giants, a shining jewel floating in the blackness of space, and you're shoved into the worst seat in the house. That was us. That was Ambassador Elena Vasquez. She was about to show them why you should never underestimate the underdog, and you're not going to want to miss what happens when they finally push her too far. Up top, the Lorathi sat like kings on a throne, their silver scales glittering as they literally looked down on everyone. Below them were the Keth, floating in their fancy water spheres, and a dozen other species, all ranked higher than humanity. Elena didn't care about the seat, she cared about the disrespect it represented. The council recognizes Earth, a Lorathi minister droned, his voice dripping with the boredom of someone taking out the trash. State your case. Elena didn't flinch, she just lit up the hologram, filling the air with images of cities on fire, of families running for their lives, of streets littered with the dead. 3 human colonies, she said, her voice steady as a rock, have been wiped out by Vorkath raiders in the last 4 months. Nexus Prime, Haven's Rest, New Bangalore, she listed them off. A combined population of 12 million souls. The current death toll is 47,000 and climbing. The numbers just hung there in the massive chamber. A few of the ambassadors had the decency to look uncomfortable, but most just stared blankly. Each time, she went on, we sent a distress call to the Council's defense fleet, and each time, help arrived between 6 and 9 days late. The raiders were long gone by then, along with everything and everyone they wanted. The fleet is busy, the minister said flatly. Response times depend on strategic priorities. Strategic priorities, Elena repeated the words, letting them sink in. Funny, when your mining station was in trouble last year, the fleet got there in 14 hours. When a Keth trade convoy got hit, it was 11 hours. But when human colonies are burning to the ground, our priority seems to be at the bottom of the list. You could feel a ripple of shock go through the hall. Little junior species weren't supposed to talk like that, especially not to the high and mighty Lorathi. But Elena was done playing by their rules. We want to know why, she demanded, and we are formally requesting that you send defense ships to our 4th colony, Esperanza. Our intelligence shows it's their next target. The minister, Selton, leaned back, a smug little smile on his face. He looked like a parent about to scold a child for throwing a tantrum. Ambassador, these raiders are a fact of life in the outer sectors. Every species has to learn to stand on its own 2 feet. The Council helps, but we can't solve all your problems for you. Perhaps if humanity spent more on its own military instead of relying on us. A cold fury settled deep in Elena's gut. We have paid our dues in full for 87 years, she shot back. We've sent our soldiers on your peacekeeping missions. Our engineers built your communication relays. Our doctors have served on your medical ships, saving lives from one end of the galaxy to the other. We have done everything you've asked. And you've been welcomed, Selton replied coolly. But membership doesn't mean the rest of the galaxy is your personal bodyguard. Sometimes, younger species need to face challenges. It builds character. A few of the other ambassadors actually chuckled at that. The Droxy ambassador made a series of sharp clicks, their version of laughter. It was a joke to them. All of it. Elena let the sound die down. Esperanza has 2 million people, families, children. The raiders will be there in 15 days. We are asking you to protect them. The matter will be reviewed, Selton said dismissively. A committee will assess the threat. You'll have our decision within 60 cycles. 60 cycles. Almost 70 days. Esperanza would be a graveyard by then. Elena looked around the chamber, at all the species humans had fought and bled for. She thought of the engineers who died fixing their stations and the soldiers who died defending their worlds. It meant nothing. It had never meant anything. I see, Elena said, her voice suddenly quiet. With a calm, deliberate motion, she reached up to her uniform and unpinned the council badge, a simple metal circle that was supposed to represent unity. It was supposed to mean they were all in this together. She gently placed the badge on the platform in front of her. What do you think you're doing? Selton asked, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. I'm doing what we should have done a long time ago, Elelena said, standing tall. On behalf of the United Earth government and every human citizen, I hereby announce our immediate and total withdrawal from the Galactic Council. The room went dead silent. Then the laughter started again, louder this time, filled with scorn. Withdrawal? The Draxi ambassador clicked. And go where? Do what? You're a tiny species on the edge of nowhere. You need us. Perhaps, Elelena said calmly. You'll come crawling back within a year, begging us to take you back, Selton sneered, and we'll think about it after you've had time to reflect on your little outburst. Elelena just picked up her datapad, ready to go, but she stopped at the edge of the platform and turned back to face the laughing crowd. They were already dismissing her, turning to chat with their neighbors as if nothing important had happened. You will all remember this day, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise, and a few of them actually stopped to listen. I just hope you don't remember it with regret. Is that a threat? Selton scoffed. From a species that can't even defend itself? It's not a threat, Elelena said, her eyes sweeping across their arrogant faces. It's a fact. You've never really seen us. You never understood what we are capable of. Maybe that's our fault. We hoped you'd value our friendship, not our strength. She turned her back on them for the last time and walked away. As the huge chamber doors hissed open, she said one last thing without looking back. Goodbye, Minister. Goodbye, everyone. I hope you never need the help you just denied us. The doors slid shut, and the council went back to business, already forgetting the little species that had just walked out. They were insignificant, after all. Their departure would change nothing, or so they thought. As Elelena walked through the station's corridors, some diplomats who noticed her shot her looks of pity, others of contempt. When she got back to the human diplomatic wing, her staff was already packing. They knew this was a possibility. It's done? Her top aide David asked. It's done. How'd they take it? A small, grim smile touched Elelena's lips. They laughed. David nodded slowly. They won't be laughing for long. No, Elelena agreed, gazing out the window at the magnificent station, at the galactic civilization humanity had served so faithfully. They won't. No one out there had any idea what was coming. They didn't realize how many of their systems were run by human engineers, how many of their trade routes were kept safe by human analysts, how many of their enemies were kept at bay by human ingenuity. They were about to find out. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity was finally done playing nice. Elelena opened a secure line to Earth. This is Ambassador Vasquez, Authorization Omega-7. The Council has made its decision. So have we. Execute Protocol Sunrise. The reply was instant. Protocol Sunrise confirmed. Welcome home, Ambassador. It's time. As Elelena closed the channel, the galaxy kept spinning, but its fate had just been sealed. The stuck-up representatives in that grand hall didn't know it yet, but their comfortable little universe had just ended. It started with a woman taking off a badge, and it would end with silence. For the first 3 months, nothing happened. The council congratulated themselves on getting rid of the noisy humans. Then, the problem started. Not with a bang, but with a quiet, creeping decay. The intergalactic communication network, secretly maintained and optimized by human programmers for decades, started having glitches. Trade shipments got lost. Critical medical supplies for a plague on a Keth world never arrived. The Vorkath raiders, who had only ever dared to hit isolated human colonies, suddenly grew bold and attacked a Larathi luxury liner. The galaxy was learning a very hard lesson. The quiet, helpful species they had mocked was not the janitor. They were the entire Foundation, and they had just walked away with the blueprints. It all started with a number that made no sense. Governor Keithmar of Larathi Prime was just going over the monthly supply manifests when he saw it. Shipments from the agricultural colonies were down by 30%. He got his logistics minister on the line immediately. This has to be a typo, he said. Run the numbers again. The minister did, and the numbers didn't change. How is this possible? Keithmar demanded. Our colonies are producing just as much as they always have. It isn't a production problem, Governor. It's a shipping problem, the minister admitted, sounding nervous. It turns out 40% of our food was imported through human trade networks. They handled the routes that were too long or too dangerous for our own ships. Their prices were better. They were always on time. Then hire someone else, Keithmar snapped. We're trying, sir, but the Draxi are charging 3 times as much. The Vaughn won't fly through the Nebula corridor, and the Mathari ships are just too slow. We're already looking at food shortages on 7 of the outer worlds. Keithmar just stared at the data screen. 40%. How could he not have known? How could none of them have known? Fix it, he ordered. This is completely unacceptable. The minister gave a slight bow and left the room, but he didn't have a fix. Nobody did. Not a quick one, anyway. The humans had spent 80 years building those trade routes. You couldn't just replace them in 3 months. Meanwhile, clear across the galaxy, the Kathvari were dealing with a crisis of their own. Their famous communication network, the pride of the Council, was starting to fail. It was the network that connected every Council species across 1,000 light-years, turning messages that once took months into instantaneous transmissions. It was seen as one of the greatest technological marvels of the modern galactic age. What very few species knew was that humans had designed and built all the relay stations. Technician Val floated in his water sphere, staring at a cascade of error codes he couldn't decipher. 3 critical relay stations had gone dark in the last week alone. The backup systems were screaming under the strain. If even one more station went offline, entire sectors of the galaxy would be cut off. Can we get them back online? Asked Director Melith, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. We can try, Val replied, but the quantum alignment systems, that's all human tech. We have the basic repair manuals, but for something this complex, he trailed off, not needing to finish. We never bothered to learn how it actually works, Melith finished for him. No, Val said quietly. We never thought we'd have to. And that was the story being repeated all over Council space. The humans had been everywhere, doing everything, and nobody had ever really noticed. They were like the air you breathe, invisible, essential, and completely taken for granted. And now they were gone. On the border worlds, the Vorkath marauders were getting brave. Captain Thasan of the Council Defense Fleet got a frantic distress call from Outpost Kur 5. A Vorkath raiding party had hit a civilian transport carrying 40 passengers, most of them Draxi merchants. Set a course for Kur 5, she ordered. Get us there as fast as this ship can go. But her ship, as fast as it was far away. It would take them 3 days to get there. And everyone knew 3 days was an eternity. Captain, her communications officer spoke up. Back when the humans were part of the Council, their patrol ships handled this sector. They could usually respond to an incident like this in 4 to 6 hours. I'm aware, Thasan said. Should we try calling them? Thasan shook her head, her face grim. Humanity left the Council. They're not answering our calls. The officer hesitated. But the people on that transport, I know. Thasan cut him off, her voice sharp with frustration. I know. They reached Care 5 3 days later. The transport ship was a ghost, drifting silently with its hull ripped wide open. There were no survivors. It was the 3rd attack like this in a month. Before humanity left, these kinds of raids were almost unheard of. It was like the Vorkath had always been afraid of something out here in the dark. Now they attacked with impunity. Nobody was saying it out loud, but everyone was thinking it. Back in the Grand Assembly Hall, the Council convened to discuss the escalating chaos. Minister Sullen brought the session to order. These are merely temporary setbacks, he announced with an air of confidence. We simply became too reliant on human services, and now we must learn to stand on our own. This is a good thing. It will ultimately make us stronger. Stronger? Ambassador Thexelar of the Kathvari rose from his water sphere. My people's entire communication network is on the verge of collapse. We've already lost all contact with 3 of our colonies. When will we get it back? Selen didn't have an answer. Nobody did. The humans are the only ones who truly understand the technology, Thexelar pressed. Then learn the technology. Salen replied coolly. It took the humans 80 years to create those systems. We don't have 80 years. Well, Salen said dismissively, perhaps you should have learned alongside them instead of just accepting their charity without a second thought. The humans are gone. We will move on. Will we? The Draxi ambassador chimed in, his mandibles clicking anxiously. My latest reports show that profits are plummeting in every single sector. The human merchants weren't just cheap, they were dependable. They took the routes no one else wanted. They solved problems for us before we even knew they were problems, he continued. Enough! Sealan's scales shimmered with anger. I will not sit here and listen to you praise the very species that abandoned us. They chose to leave. Let them face the consequences of that choice. We are the Council. We governed this galaxy for 10,000 years before humans could even reach their own moon. We will govern it for 10,000 more. The session ended, like so many others recently, with nothing resolved. In the weeks that followed, a few curious investigators started digging into old records, trying to figure out exactly what humanity had been doing all those years. And what they discovered was shocking. The Lorathi Intelligence Ministry found that human observer ships had formed the secret backbone of the early warning system that protected the core worlds. For decades, humans had willingly taken the most mind-numbingly boring, distant patrol assignments, the jobs nobody else wanted. Everyone just assumed it was because they were a young species, eager to impress. But the real reason was something else entirely. Human ships had quietly detected and deflected 7 major invasion attempts from powers outside the galaxy. They had done it with back-channel diplomacy, with careful negotiation, and with subtle displays of power that the Council never even knew happened. They never filed a report. They never asked for a medal or a reward. But why? Asked Intelligence Director Voss, staring at the classified files in disbelief. Why would they keep all of this a secret? His analyst had no idea, and neither did anyone else. On a dozen different worlds, Council species were finally starting to grasp just how much they had relied on humans for things they never even thought about. Human engineers had been quietly maintaining their power grids. Human doctors had been staffing their most remote medical outposts. Human teachers had been running schools for mixed-species children that their own governments had forgotten. None of this was in a treaty. None of it was part of some formal agreement. The humans had just seen people in need and helped them. They saw problems and they fixed them. They saw suffering and they eased it. And all they ever asked for in return was to be treated like equals. And in return, the Council had given them the worst seats in the Great Chamber. 3 months after humanity walked out, Ambassador Thexelar called a private meeting with senior Council members. We need to ask them to come back, he said plainly. Celine just laughed. Come back? They threatened us and walked away from their duties. We should be punishing them, not begging them to return. They didn't threaten us, Thexelar countered. Ambassador Vasquez just said that we would remember this day. Was that a threat? Or was it a warning from someone who could see what we were too blind to notice? Thexelar's many eyes looked troubled. Minister, I have spent the last month reviewing our dependencies on human services. The situation is far worse than any of us imagined. If things keep going this way, we could be facing total system collapse within a year. You're exaggerating. I truly hope I am, Thexelar said, but I don't think so. Celine waved his hand dismissively. The humans will come crawling back. They have to. They're a tiny species, stuck out in the galactic boondocks. They need our trade, our protection, our technology. Once their pride wears off and reality sinks in, they'll be begging us to let them back in. And if they don't, Thexelar asked, then they will fade into the irrelevance they deserve. But even as Celine spoke those arrogant words, something was happening out in human space. Fleets were moving, new stations were being built, messages were flying across secret channels the Council never knew existed. Humanity wasn't crawling, and they definitely weren't fading. They were getting ready. On Earth, in a secure bunker deep beneath the mountains of what was once Switzerland, Humanity's leaders were reviewing the progress of a plan called Protocol Sunrise. Admiral Chen Wei gave the fleet readiness report. All primary combat fleets are at full operational status, he said. Our reserve fleets are finishing their final drills. We can deploy the entire force within 72 hours if the order is given. President Okonjo nodded. And the council? How much longer until they realize the mess they're in? Based on our projections, the admiral replied, they're looking at major economic collapse within 6 months and widespread political chaos within a year. That is, unless the Dreth make their move first. The Dreth? Someone asked. Our intelligence confirms they're watching the situation closely. They've always been afraid of us, even if they didn't know why. Now they see us gone, the admiral continued. They see the council getting weaker by the day. They're weighing their options. President Okonjo looked around the table at the faces of the men and women leading the human race. They all looked tired. They looked sad. They had spent 87 years trying to be good partners to the galaxy, hoping to be accepted. That hope was gone now. We did everything we could, she said, her voice barely a whisper. We helped them. We protected them. We asked for nothing but a little respect. I know, Admiral Chen said, but respect was the one thing they were never willing to give. Then we have no other choice, the president said, her voice firming. Continue with the preparations. When the time is right, the galaxy is going to learn exactly who we are. Okono gazed out the window, the brilliant blue marble of Earth hanging in the void. We'll save them anyway, he declared, his voice ringing with quiet resolve, because that is who we choose to be. And with that, the meeting was over. Preparations moved forward. But out there, in the silent darkness between the stars, something was stirring. Something that had slumbered for almost 100 years while humanity played the part of the galaxy's humble little brother. The galaxy was about to meet that something, and nothing would ever be the same again. Just 8 months after humanity walked away, the galaxy started to unravel. The assault came out of nowhere. 300 Vorkath warships tore through hyperspace, appearing above the outer colonies of Larathi Prime. They didn't broadcast demands. They didn't open negotiations. They just started setting fire to everything in their path. From his command center, Governor Keith Marr could only watch the horror unfold. One by one, the colony signals on his screen winked out. Millions of his people were being slaughtered, and he was completely powerless to stop it. "Where is the defense fleet?" he roared. "On its way, Governor," his aide stammered. "But the Vorkath are too fast. They'll be gone before our ships even get there." "How is this happening? We should have had some warning. The early detection systems, sir, they aren't working right." The aide's voice dropped to a whisper. "They depended on the patrol network, the human patrol network, the one we don't have anymore." A chilling realization gripped Keith Marr's heart. The humans. It all came back to the humans. For 8 long months, the council had lied to itself, insisting everything was fine. They told themselves humanity wasn't that important. They dismissed the escalating problems as temporary glitches, confident that new solutions would pop up. They truly believed the galaxy didn't need one tiny species from the forgotten edge of space. They couldn't have been more wrong. When the Council Defense Fleet finally arrived at the Larathi colonies, it was 18 hours too late. The Vorkath had vanished, taking millions of Larathi as slaves and leaving behind the smoking ruins of cities that had stood for centuries. It was the single worst attack in their history, and it was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, the Vorkath got even more brazen, hitting Kathvari shipping lanes. They pillaged Draxi mining outposts. They struck deep into territories that had been considered untouchable for generations. The Council sent its fleet to retaliate, but something was terribly wrong. The ships couldn't seem to coordinate. Orders got garbled. Reinforcements were sent to the wrong systems. The mighty military force that had guarded the galaxy for millennia was now fumbling around like a giant stumbling in the dark. And Admiral Than knew exactly why. She had locked herself away for months, digging through old records and piecing together a truth no one wanted to face. Humanity was our nervous system, she told the council in a tense emergency briefing. For decades, their communication specialists were on our command bridges. We thought they were just interns, learning from us. But they were the ones making our fleet actually work. They built translation bridges between the tactical software of different species. They mediated disputes between commanders who couldn't even understand each other's military doctrines. They were the very glue holding our entire defense structure together. That's impossible, Minister Selton scoffed. Our fleet is the greatest in the galaxy. We don't need humans to function. Then explain, Admiral Than shot back, why we've lost every single major battle since they left. Explain why our response times have doubled. Explain why 3 of our own battle groups opened fire on each other last week because of a simple miscommunication. Selton had no answer. None of them did. But the military collapsing wasn't even the worst of it. The truly terrifying news was coming from the galactic border. The Dreth hegemony was on the move. The Dreth were an ancient empire, far older than the Council, and they had waged war against it for thousands of years. But for the last century, they had been eerily quiet, staying behind their border as if they were afraid of something. Now, whatever had scared them was gone. Intelligence Director Voss stood before a closed session of the Council leaders, his face a mask of dread. The Dreth are gathering massive fleets all along the border. Our analysts believe they're gearing up for a full-scale invasion. When? Selton demanded. We don't know, but it will be soon. It seems like they're waiting for something. What are they waiting for? Voss paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in. We think they're waiting for confirmation that humanity isn't going to step in. The room fell dead silent. Selton's scales faded to a sickly gray. Why on earth would the Dreth care about humanity? He whispered. The humans are weak. Everybody knows that. Everybody believed that, Voss corrected him grimly. But I've been digging through classified intelligence from the last 100 years, and the story it tells is unsettling. He tapped a control, and a holographic display filled the air with documents that had been buried so deep in the archives, no one had bothered to look at them. Documents that changed everything. 17 years ago, the Dreth gathered an invasion fleet of 2,000 warships. They were poised to strike at the Council's core worlds. That invasion never came. I remember, Selton said. Our diplomats negotiated a brilliant peace treaty. No, Voss said, his voice cold and flat. The Dreth received a private message from the planet Earth. The contents of that message are still classified, even from us. But here's what we do know. Within 24 hours, the Dreth fleet turned around and went home. The invasion was called off, and the Dreth haven't made a single hostile move for 17 years, until now. Until humanity left, the Exceller finished for him. The Dreth are checking to see if the guard dog is still in the yard, and so far, they haven't seen anything to be afraid of. The Council argued for 3 straight days, debating strategies and alliances, but it was all just noise. There was only one real move left on the board, and every single one of them knew it. They had to get humanity back. Ambassador Exceller was the one chosen for the humiliating mission. The humans respected him. He had been one of the few who had argued against their poor treatment over the years. If anyone could talk them into coming back, it was him. He journeyed to Earth with a full delegation in tow. They brought with them formal apologies, promises of sweeping reforms, and offers of a full partnership with an elevated status. Ambassador Elena Vasquez agreed to meet them in Geneva, in the very same building where human diplomats had first welcomed the Council to Earth nearly a century ago. She didn't look the way Exceller remembered. She looked weary, but also unshakably confident, like someone who had made a difficult choice and found peace with it. Ambassador Exceller, she greeted him with a nod. It's good to see you. And you, Ambassador Vasquez, he replied. I only wish we had done more to stand with you when it counted. So do I, she said simply. They took seats across from each other at a plain wooden table. There were no grand chambers, no thrones, just 2 diplomats with the crushing weight of history hanging between them. You know why I'm here, the Exelar began. I do. The Council has authorized me to offer humanity full membership with equal voting rights. You would have a permanent seat on the High Council. Your colonies would fall under full Council protection. Your species would be officially recognized as a founding partner in a new galactic order. Elena listened patiently, her face giving nothing away. When he had finished, she let the silence stretch for a long moment. That is a very generous offer, she said at last. But I'm afraid I have to decline. Ambassador, please, he begged. The Dreth are about to invade. The Vorkath are tearing our outer worlds apart. Our own fleet is falling to pieces without your people. The Council is collapsing. I know. Then why won't you help us? Elena rose from her chair and walked to the tall window. Outside, the majestic mountains of Earth reached for a perfect blue sky. In a park below, children were playing. Birds were singing in trees that were hundreds of years old. When the Vorkath were butchering my people on our own colonies, we asked you for help, she said, her voice soft but sharp as glass. We didn't make demands. We didn't issue threats. We just asked for help, the way partners are supposed to, and the Council laughed at us. Minister Celine told us that younger species have to learn to solve their own problems. That was wrong of him. We see that now. Yes, she agreed, turning back to face him. But you only see it now because you need us. For 87 years, we served the Council faithfully. We kept you safe in ways you never even bothered to notice. We supported you in ways you never acknowledged, and we never asked for anything in return except for a little basic dignity. I know, he said, his many eyes filled with sorrow. I tried to. You did try, she conceded. You were one of the few. But the Council, as a whole, decided we weren't worth their respect. You took every gift we gave and handed us contempt in return. What can we do? He pleaded. Tell us how to make this right. Elena returned to her seat, her voice gentle but unbreakable. Nothing. There is nothing you can do. We aren't angry, Ambassador. We aren't out for revenge. We just don't need your approval anymore. We don't need you to validate us. We spent 87 years hoping you would finally see what we were worth. We're done hoping. So you'll just let the Council burn? You'll let billions die? Elena offered a small, sad smile. I never said that. When the real crisis arrives, when the time is right, humanity will act. But we will act on our own terms, not as your employees. We will help because it's the right thing to do, not because you finally decided we're worthy of respect. The Exelar leaned forward, desperate. What are you talking about? What is humanity planning? You'll see, she said. Soon enough. For now, tell the Council to brace for the Dreth and do what you can to protect your people. What do you do when everything seems lost, when you're convinced there's no hope left? The human representative had some strange advice. Look to the stars. After that cryptic message, the meeting was over, and Ambassador Thexelar returned to the Council chambers with his team. When he reported his failure to Minister Celine, the minister was furious. She refused everything? Everything? Celine's scales practically vibrated with frustration. Arrogant creatures! They'd rather let the entire galaxy burn than help the very people who bruised their egos. But Thexelar quietly corrected him. No, that's not what she said. She said humanity would act when the real crisis arrived. She told us to look to the stars. Celine scoffed, dismissing it as useless riddles and poetry. But Thexelar wasn't so sure. He'd seen something in Elena's eyes. Not anger, not a thirst for revenge, but something that looked almost like pity. Pity for the Council. Pity for a galaxy that had no idea what was really coming. 4 months later, the Dreth invasion began. They arrived with 10,000 ships, a tidal wave of darkness and fire pouring across the border. Their vessels were ancient and horrifying, built for one purpose by a civilization that had known nothing but war for 50,000 years. Every single one of their ships was bigger than anything the Council had, and each one carried weapons that could turn a planet into a cloud of ash. The Council's defense fleet met them at the Charon Nebula, 3,000 ships against 10,000. The Council commanders knew the odds were impossible, but they had no choice. If the Dreth broke through, nothing stood between them and the core worlds. Admiral Thesson was in command. She had spent 4 long months getting ready for this, drilling her crews, trying desperately to patch the holes in coordination left when the humans departed. It wasn't enough. She knew it wasn't enough, but she had to fight. "All ships, engage at will," she ordered, her voice steady. "Make them pay for every single light year." The battle raged for 6 hours. The Council fleet fought with incredible bravery, managing to destroy over 1,000 Dreth ships. But for every enemy vessel they took down, 3 of their own were lost. The communication problems that had haunted them for a year came back with a vengeance. Ships drifted out of formation, commands were garbled and misunderstood, and in the blinding chaos of battle, allies fired on each other by mistake. When the smoke cleared, the Council fleet was shattered. Fewer than 500 ships were left. From the bridge of her crippled flagship, Admiral Thesson watched helplessly as the Dreth Armada pushed forward. "Signal the Council," she said, her voice a whisper. "Tell them we failed. Tell them to start the evacuations of the core worlds." Her communications officer was openly weeping as she relayed the message. Back in the Grand Assembly Hall, absolute panic had erupted. Representatives were screaming at one another. Some were demanding an immediate surrender, while others called for a glorious last stand that would achieve nothing but more death. Minister Celine tried to restore order, but his voice was completely drowned out by the noise. "We're doomed," the Draxi ambassador clicked in despair. "The Dreth will enslave us all." Someone weakly suggested, "Maybe the humans." Another representative shot back, "The humans won't save us. They hate us. They'll probably watch us burn and laugh while doing it." Amid the chaos, Ambassador Thexelar floated silently in his sphere, remembering Elena's last words. "When everything seems lost, look to the stars." So he did. The first reports trickled in from the few border stations still online. Unidentified ships were appearing, first hundreds, then thousands, and they were all coming from the direction of human space. "Are they Council vessels?" someone asked, a sliver of hope in their voice. "No," the communications officer replied, her voice sounding strange. "The energy signatures don't match any known Council design. They're larger than anything we have on record." The holographic display in the middle of the chamber flickered to life, showing the approaching fleet. A stunned silence washed over the entire Grand Assembly Hall. The ships were beyond massive. The smallest among them was bigger than the Council's mightiest battleship. The largest was the size of a small moon. They moved in flawless formation, thousands of ships gliding through space as a single entity. Their hulls gleamed with a metal no one recognized, covered in weapon arrays that were both vast and terrifying. And displayed proudly on every single ship was one simple symbol, the blue and green circle of Earth. "Impossible," Minister Celine whispered. "This is completely impossible." A communication request flashed on every screen in the hall. Ambassador Thexelar was the one to accept it. A hologram of Elena Vasquez materialized in the center of the room. She wasn't wearing diplomatic robes anymore. She was in a full military uniform. Her expression was calm, almost sad. "Council of the Galactic Alliance," she said, her voice clear and strong. "This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Fleet. We are aware of the Dreth invasion. We're here to help." "Help?" Seelan's voice cracked. "What is this fleet? Where did these ships come from? You told us you were weak. You told us you couldn't even protect your own colonies." Elena looked at him with that same pity from months ago. "We told you nothing, Minister. You told yourselves. You saw the small patrol ships we sent out and assumed that was the best we had. You looked at our humble engineers and our simple merchants and decided that was all we were. We never lied to you. For 87 years, we simply let you believe what you wanted to believe." Selin was aghast. "You hid this for 87 years?" "Yes." "But why?" Elena paused for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was filled with an old, deep sorrow. "Because we hoped we would never have to use it. Because we hoped you would accept us as friends and partners. Because we were afraid that if we showed you our true strength, you would fear us instead of respecting us. We wanted to earn your trust through service, through kindness, through decades of being a faithful ally. We wanted you to value us for our hearts, not for our weapons." She looked around the chamber, her gaze passing over the faces of 100 species who had mocked humanity, dismissed humanity, and treated humanity like a cosmic joke for nearly a century. "We were wrong," she said softly. "You never saw our hearts. You only saw what you thought was weakness, and you despised us for it. So now you will see our strength. I only hope you won't despise us for that too." The display switched to a tactical map of the system. The Dreth Armada was closing in on the core worlds. The Council's few remaining ships were scattered and broken. There was nothing standing between the Dreth and total victory. Nothing, except the human fleet. "We will engage the Dreth," Elena stated. "We ask for nothing in return. We are making no demands. We are not doing this because you asked us, or because you apologized, or because you finally decided to treat us with respect. We are doing this because innocent people will die if we stand by and do nothing." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We are doing this because it's the right thing to do," the transmission ended. The human fleet met the Dreth Armada in the empty space between stars. 10,000 Dreth warships against 8,000 human vessels. The Dreth commanders were arrogant. They had just crushed the Council's fleet. They figured these newcomers would be just as easy. They were wrong. The battle lasted just 4 hours. In those 4 hours, the galaxy was changed forever. Human weapons sliced through Dreth shields as if they were made of paper. Human ships moved with a level of coordination that made the Council's best admirals look like clumsy amateurs. Whenever the Dreth commanders tried to change tactics, the humans were already one step ahead. When Dreth reinforcements arrived, human ships were already there waiting for them. From her crippled flagship, Admiral Thesson watched as the Dreth Armada was taken apart piece by piece. She had been in dozens of battles in her career. She had never, ever seen anything like this. "They aren't just beating the Dreth," her tactical officer said in sheer awe. "They're doing it with surgical precision. They're wiping out their military power while keeping casualties on both sides to a minimum." It was true. The humans weren't just winning. They were winning with restraint. They disabled ships whenever possible instead of blowing them up. They targeted weapon systems and engines, leaving life support untouched. They accepted every surrender instantly and went out of their way to protect their new captives. They were fighting a war with mercy. When it was all over, the Dreth High Admiral sent a surrender request. His voice was broken. "We yield. We yield to the humans. We will withdraw from Council space immediately. We will accept any terms you offer. Please, please just make it stop." Elena's response was broadcast for the whole galaxy to hear. "Your surrender is accepted. You will withdraw to your home territory. You will release all prisoners you've taken, both in this war and in past conflicts. You will dismantle your entire offensive military. And you will never again threaten the people of this galaxy, Council or otherwise." Yes, we agree to everything." "Then go home," Elena said. "Rebuild your civilization for peace instead of war. We don't hate you. We don't wish you any suffering. This war is over." And just like that, the Dreth fled. Their great armada, the one that had threatened to enslave the entire galaxy, limped back to their distant empire in shattered pieces. They would never be a threat to the Council again. Back in the Grand Assembly Hall, no one said a word for a very long time. The representatives just stared at the holographic displays showing the aftermath of the battle. They stared at the human fleet, massive, terrifying, and unbelievably merciful. Finally, Ambassador Thexelar broke the silence. "They saved us," he said in disbelief. "After everything we did to them, they saved us." "They had to," Celine argued, though his voice was weak. "They're part of this galaxy too. They had no choice." "They had every choice," Thexelar replied, turning to face the minister. "They could have waited until the Dreth destroyed us completely. They could have conquered what was left. They could have made us their slaves, just like we made them second-class citizens for 87 years. Instead, they chose mercy, and Sultan was left utterly speechless. Miles away on her command ship, Elena Vasquez gazed out at the quiet expanse of stars. The war was finished, the galaxy was finally safe, and humankind had just made its grand entrance onto the universal stage. Beside her stood Admiral Chen Wei. "The Council is going to want to talk now," he said. "They'll offer us the keys to the kingdom, leadership, control, anything we ask for." "I know," she replied. "So what are we going to tell them?" Elena let the question hang in the air. She thought back on her decades of service, the years of being treated with contempt, and that pivotal moment she laid her badge on the podium and walked away. She considered the kind of person she aimed to be, and the kind of species she hoped humanity could become. "We're going to tell them the truth," she said at last. "We don't want to rule them. We never did. We just wanted to be their partners, their friends. And now we get to build something new, something better. Not because they've finally decided to respect us, but because it's the right thing to do." She turned from the star-dusted view and headed for the communication center. There was work ahead, a galaxy to mend, a future to forge. "We showed them our strength," she said over her shoulder. "Now we'll show them something much more important." "And what's that?" "We'll show them who we choose to be." In the days that followed the great battle, a deep silence fell over the galaxy. Ships navigated carefully through the wreckage of the biggest war in recorded history. Rescue crews sifted through the debris, pulling survivors from both sides. Human medical frigates were treating the Dreth wounded right alongside the Council's own casualties. No one was refused aid. No one was left behind to die. On the Dreth homeworld, a civilization that had known only conquest for 50,000 years was starting to change. Their entire fleet was gone. Their empire lay in ruins. They braced for punishment, for enslavement. They expected humanity to do exactly what they would have done in the same position. What they got instead was help. Human ships arrived loaded with food and medicine. Human engineers came to help repair their shattered infrastructure. Human diplomats came with terms that were firm but incredibly fair. They demanded disarmament and reform, but not humiliation, never subjugation. The Dreth High Chancellor met with Admiral Elena Vasquez on his devastated homeworld. He was an old, weary man who had spent his whole life planning for a war that was now over for good. "I don't understand," he confessed. "We tried to enslave your allies. We would have burned down everything you hold dear. Why are you showing us mercy?" Elena looked at the ancient creature before her, seeing his confusion, his fear, and the desperate flicker of hope that this wasn't all some elaborate trick. "Because mercy isn't a weakness," she explained. "It's the most difficult kind of strength. Anyone can destroy an enemy. It takes something more to build peace with one. Your people could rule the galaxy right now. There's no one left to stop you." "We don't want to rule the galaxy. That was never the goal." "Then what is it you want?" A small smile touched Elena's lips. "We want the same thing we wanted when we first took to the stars. We want friends. We want partners. We want to explore and learn and grow with other civilizations. We want to lend a hand where it's needed and get a hand in return. That's it. That's everything." The Dreth High Chancellor bowed his head. For the first time in 50,000 years, a leader of the Dreth hegemony began to weep. "We will become what you've described," he vowed. "We will learn to be better. I can't promise we'll succeed, but we will try. Your mercy has given us the chance to try." The reconstruction of the Dreth would take decades. It was going to be hard, slow, and at times painful. But it would happen. A civilization once defined by war would learn to define itself by something new. Humanity had proved to them that change was possible. Inside the Grand Assembly Hall, the Council convened to map out the future. The chamber was more subdued than it had ever been. The same representatives who had once openly mocked humanity now sat in a state of humbled shock. Minister Celine was the first to rise and speak. His scales had faded to gray since the battle, and he moved with the heavy burden of his past actions. "I stand here today to finally admit a truth we ignored for 87 years. Humanity was never the weak species we took them for. They were protectors who chose to hide their strength, servants who chose to serve. They were partners who just hoped to be valued for their character instead of their might. He paused, steadying himself. We failed them. We took their help for granted. We scoffed at their pleas for basic dignity. We let their people die while we got tangled up in red tape. The fact that they saved us anyway, the fact that they showed mercy to an enemy that had done them such harm, well, that tells us everything we need to know about who they really are. Ambassador Thexelar floated forward in his water sphere. So what do we do now? How can we possibly make this right? We can't make it right, Celine admitted. The past is done. But we can choose to build a better future. He turned to the holographic projection of Elena Vasquez, who was joining the session from her flagship. Ambassador Admiral Vasquez, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I offer our most profound apologies for how humanity has been treated. We would like to offer you leadership of the Council itself. Take your rightful place at the head of the table. Guide us, as you should have been doing all along. Elena was silent for a long moment, the entire chamber holding its breath. No, she said simply. Selin blinked. No, but humanity will not rule over you. That was never what we wanted. We didn't save you to become your new masters. We saved you because it was the right thing to do. Then, what do you want from us? I want what we've always wanted, a true partnership. Not a council where some species are on top and others are at the bottom. Not an alliance where your power dictates your worth. I want something new, something better. She stepped forward, and her holographic image seemed to grow, filling the room. For 10,000 years, this council has been a hierarchy. The strong rule and the weak serve. Everyone claws for a higher position while those at the bottom are left behind. That's the system that created this war in the first place. It bred the resentment that turned the Dreth into conquerors. It fostered the contempt that allowed you to dismiss humanity for 87 years. What's the alternative you're proposing? A true alliance, a federation where every single species has an equal voice, no matter their military might or economic status, where choices are made for the good of everyone, not just a powerful few. Where we help each other not out of obligation, but because that's what partners do. A buzz of conversation filled the chamber. The idea was revolutionary. It flew in the face of 10,000 years of galactic tradition, but as everyone knew, those traditions had failed spectacularly. That will be difficult, Thexelar noted. Many will fight it. Old prejudices die hard. Nothing worth building ever comes easy, Elena agreed. But we have a real opportunity now, a chance to create something better. The Dreth are willing to change. The Council species have seen the dead end of the old ways, and humanity is willing to help. Help? How? We'll share our technology. We'll share our knowledge. We'll help protect anyone who can't protect themselves and ask for nothing in return but friendship. We will not be your rulers. We will be your equals, walking beside you. Selin stepped down from his high platform. He crossed the chamber floor until he was standing right before Elena's image. Then, very slowly, he bowed his head. I was wrong about humanity, he said, his voice quiet. I was wrong about so many things. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn it. Elena offered a gentle smile. Forgiveness isn't earned, Minister. It's either given freely or it's not given at all. And I give it now. To you, to the Council, to everyone who treated us with disdain. The past is over. Let's start building the future. One after another, the other representatives descended from their platforms. They gathered on the main floor, standing together as equals for the first time in 10,000 years. And on that day, the Galactic Federation was born. Years went by. The galaxy healed. The Dreth became some of their most surprising and steadfast allies. Their warrior culture slowly shifted into a tradition of protection instead of conquest. The former Council species learned to cooperate without a pecking order. Humanity spread throughout the stars, not as conquerors, but as partners, friends, and helpers. Elena Vasquez eventually retired from the military, becoming the first human to serve as the Federation's ambassador at large. She journeyed from one world to the next, building bridges, resolving conflicts, and showing the galaxy what humanity had always known to be true. That kindness was stronger than cruelty, mercy was more powerful than revenge, and the true measure of strength was found in how you treated those who couldn't fight back. On the anniversary of the day humanity walked out of the Council, a new holiday was declared. It was called Remembrance Day, a time to reflect not just on the war that nearly destroyed everything, but on the powerful lesson it had taught them all. The Laorathi representative, the very one who had once laughed in Elena's face, delivered the first Remembrance Day speech. We remember this day not with shame, though we certainly feel it. We remember it as the day we finally learned the truth. We learned that the quiet ones were not weak. We learned that the humble were not inferior. We learned that the very species we had dismissed as insignificant had been saving us all along. He paused, his voice thick with emotion when he spoke again. But the most important lesson of all was this. Imagine being told you're not good enough for the entire galaxy. They kicked us out, called us too emotional, too chaotic, and left us for dead. But when a monstrous fleet arrived to burn their worlds to cinders, those same aliens who scorned us were faced with a choice. And so were we. They could have been annihilated. They could have been conquered. But they weren't. Do you want to know why? Stick with me for a minute to hear how the outcasts became the heroes. In a quiet garden on Earth, an old woman named Elena Vasquez listened to that story being broadcast across the stars, her grandkids playing at her feet. Her hair was silver now, but her eyes held the same fire that had once stared down alien councils. Her grandson tugged on her sleeve. "Grandma," he asked, "why did you save them? After everything they did to us?" Elena just smiled, pulling the little boy into a hug. "Because who we are is a choice we make every single second," she said softly. The Council chose to be cruel, the Dreth chose to conquer, and humanity, we chose to help. But wasn't it super hard? Weren't you mad? "Oh, of course," she chuckled. "It was incredibly hard, and some days I was furious. But being angry is like holding a hot rock. The only person it's guaranteed to burn is you. Mercy, though, that's like a bonfire. It warms everyone around it. I just decided I'd rather be warm." She gazed up at the sky where new stars, well, new starships, were twinkling. Up there, ships filled with humans, Laorathi, and even the fearsome Dreth were flying side by side, finally at peace. "You know," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "the real change happened the day they kicked us out. It wasn't about them getting weaker, it was about us getting stronger. We finally realized their opinion didn't define us. Their insults couldn't hurt us unless we let them. We were always the masters of our own destiny. We just had to stop pretending we needed their permission." Her grandson leaned his head against her, not quite getting all the big words, but feeling the truth in them. He knew one day he'd be telling his own kids this very story. And all across the galaxy, for countless generations, families would gather on Remembrance Day. They'd tell the legend of the stubborn, scrappy species from that tiny blue planet who saved everyone by leaving and then saved them all over again by coming back. They didn't come back for revenge. They didn't come back for power or to say, "I told you so." They came back for one simple reason, because it was the right thing to do. That was our gift to a universe that had forgotten how. And finally, the universe was ready to learn.